last Sunday, we began an interesting series called Miracles Then and Now, and taking a look at the various miracles that we see of Jesus as we read them in the Gospels. And I began by suggesting, and not trying to assume that everybody is sort of uniform with regards to believing in miracles. There are many of us here who would testify and would give an account, even of our own lives, of a miracle that has happened to us. I know even after the service last week, a couple of you just said, I believe that I've had a miracle in my own life. And we believe, and you believed, and you've expressed that God has intervened in your way, in your life, in your affairs, and has acted in a way to bring you and to restore you in various ways. So there are those who really hold on to and have a convinced belief in miracles. For others, and here's where I'm not assuming, is that there are those who might be a little bit more skeptical when it comes to believing in miracles. There will be those who say, I need more evidence in order to really believe, not simply in miracles, but also maybe even to believe in God. We live in a culture in many ways that demands more fact than fiction. And as I left it last week, we sort of came to this conclusion that perhaps it can be said, just because miracles don't always happen, that doesn't mean that they don't what? Sometimes happen. Amen? Yeah. Now today we're going to be taking a look at another genre, meaning type of miracle that we find in the Gospels, that we find in Jesus' own life, and they're called exorcisms. What do we make of these particular miracles in Scripture? What do we, and as we read them, how do we appropriate them, not only for what they were in Scripture in the time that Jesus actually performed them, if I could use that word, but how do we appropriate them now for our own lives and in our own culture and context today? But before we do, let's bow in a word of prayer. Let's pray. Our gracious God, I pray this morning that you would protect me as we preach and as I preach these words. God, may your Holy Spirit give me wisdom and discernment and empathy and compassion, and also a sense of where you are leading with regards to this topic. For we believe that this is not simply fiction, but it is fact, and we come and we are those who are engaged in spiritual battle, in spiritual warfare. So God, we ask and pray that by your Spirit that you would be with us and allow your Spirit to speak to us so that indeed we might know that you are our rock and our Redeemer. In the name of Jesus we pray. And all God's people say, Amen. Amen. When it comes to the miracles of Jesus, and in particularly when it comes to exorcisms within the Gospels, there are actually scholars would suggest that there are 9 recorded exorcisms. Now, they could be overlap. Matthew, Mark, and Luke, interestingly enough, maybe actually speak of the same exorcism or the same miracle, but they use a different way, maybe even a different context. So when scholars are taking a look at these exorcisms within the Gospels, it's generally agreed that there are 9 recorded exorcisms that we have. Interestingly enough, John's Gospel doesn't record 1 exorcism. It is only in Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And maybe the best 2 known exorcisms that have been an influence to the Christian church have been the exorcism of Mary Magdalene. Remember that one? Where he exorcised, and it was recognized in Luke chapter 8 that Jesus exorcised 7 demons. And because of that, she became a follower of him. So even in a sense, the miracle brought about faith in her own life. The other one that we know about, and that we have maybe read even from the time that we were in Sunday school, is the story of Jesus' encounter with a man by the name of Legion. And so what are we to make of these kind of miracles? We see Jesus as shepherd. We see Jesus as teacher and as preacher. Even last week, I think many of us can be comfortable with Jesus as a healer, as someone who comes and brings healing, physical healing to those. And we appropriate that even in our own lives. But here is the question: what about Jesus as exorcist? What about Jesus as exorcist? And to be honest with you, as I was sort of tackling this is not my first default when I think about Jesus. And there's a part of me I was sort of like John's Gospel. I don't even want to touch this, right, in terms of what's going on here. But it exists. It is in the Gospels. It is a part of Jesus' ministry. And to avoid it in many ways would even be to avoid a significant portion or an understanding of theology that I think is important for us even today. Now, in our culture, and you can one degree or another maybe reflect on this yourself, and this is just even my thoughts on this, maybe more than anybody else's, but in our culture, the world of the demonic, the world of evil, in a sense, in many ways has been domesticated. And what I mean by that is that in fact, we do show a fascination with evil in books, and in movies, and in TV shows, and those of you maybe who are familiar with your kids or grandkids, even in video games as well too. Isn't that the case? And what I mean by domesticating is that there's a sense that we sort of control it, don't we? We can put it up on the screen, but then we can turn it off. And if you're like me, I'm not really into that sort of genre anyway, so I just cover my eyes. You know, absolutely. And then what I mean by this is that in some ways we have domesticated evil in the sense that it is more for our entertainment. And we've maybe sort of placed it in the realm of fiction as opposed to truth. Do you understand where I'm going with that? Yeah. And yet, not only is there a fascination with this in our culture today, but there's also maybe underneath that fascination, whether you believe in it or not, there is somewhere in our thinking and in our experience the suspicion that this power is in fact real. Amen? Mm-hmm. And for some, it can be very discomforting. I'm going to unpack that a little bit later on. Now, some will take a look at the Bible and say, well, it's rather unsophisticated, meaning that it really does take the supernatural world of evil as very real and is very powerful. There would be those who would say, do you really believe in a personal devil, a personal an adversary against God by the name of Satan? Do you actually believe in the demonic world? And there are definitely critics of the Bible along those lines. But there also, we say, I maybe not necessarily adhere to any particular religious belief necessarily, but they can look into the world and they can see how there is this power, there is this presence that does influence our humanity in both systemic ways, meaning that sometimes evil does perpetrate itself through government, through institutions, through even the ways in which nations treat each other, systemic ways, but also in personal ways. We see how evil can play itself out in dehumanizing those whom we love, but also dehumanizing us if we are not careful. And so I would push back at those who suggest that the Bible is a bit archaic when it comes to this understanding of exorcism, of the demonic world. Because I believe even those who are not Christians would say, yeah, there is a power, there is a presence, and you need to open your eyes to it in our world and also in people's lives. And I think this is why the gospel writers and even the early church included these miracles of exorcisms. Why Jesus was recorded by the gospel writers casting out evil spirits, those who were possessed by the demonic. Because, truth be known, and this is where it's going, is that there is a spiritual battle that goes on to a greater or to a lesser degree in each one of us. Amen? There's a part of it that we come face to face with it and in honesty have to say, yes, there is a battle that goes on for my soul. There is an adversary that would love to pull me away from the living God. For some, maybe like us who are sitting here today and also standing up and preaching this message, for some it's rather hidden, right? We keep it hidden behind our sports jackets and our nice, we keep it behind maybe even our sophisticated words and our eloquence. But for some, this is out there for everyone to see. And sometimes it makes even us feel a little bit uncomfortable. And in Mark 5, we have such a character. And I think what's interesting is that he makes others around him feel uncomfortable, even those who are close to Jesus. But the encounter that Jesus has with him is interesting because he just lets it all out. And as we know, Mark says that Jesus is traveling by the boat and he's trying to get away from the crowds. And he's moving across from one part of the Sea of Galilee over to the other part, actually into the Gentile territory. And no sooner does he step out of the boat, and he can't get a break, right? He's trying to get away from the crowds, and he takes it. I'm going to get in this boat. I'm going to go to the other side. Maybe nobody's going to notice me over there. I can just have a little bit of rest. The way that Mark actually says it, almost as soon as he steps out of the boat onto the shore, guess who shows up? There's this demoniac, as he describes. And it's interesting the way that Mark starts to paint this picture for us. Let's read it together. He lived among the Jews, and no one could restrain him anymore, even with a chain. For he had often been restrained with shackles and chains, but the chains he wrenched apart, and the shackles he broke in pieces, and no one had the strength to subdue him. Night and day among the tombs and on the mountains he was always howling and bruising himself with stones. Mark here describes a picture, a reality of someone who really, in many ways, is and has become possessed. And that word means controlled, manipulated, tormented by evil and by an evil spirit. And later on, we even see it's more than simply just one. And there is this behavior, this outward behavior that everyone can see and everybody knows. There is this howling and there is this sort of self-harming behavior that's an outward working in some ways of his torment and of his pain. Now, I want to sort of watch where we go here. This is where I really need to be careful. Is that Mark here is not trying to be a psychologist. I think we need to be clear that he's not trying to diagnose this man. And often that we as moderns take a look at this passage, and actually it has been interpreted in this way, that this man is either dealing with, and it's in commentaries, that he's either dealing with schizophrenia or epilepsy or some other type of disease. And really this miracle wouldn't happen today because, well, he would be able to get the proper medication in order to live and do well. That is not where Mark is going with this, and I want to separate ourselves even from that particular interpretation. What Mark is saying here is that there is, and describing in many ways, a spiritual war going on for this man's soul. Perhaps he has been trying to battle it on his own. Perhaps he's reached out for help. We sort of get a sense even there too that there have been others who have just said, wow, this is out of control and we need to restrain him. But even that is too powerful. He's even been too powerful for those chains. And there's a sense here also that maybe he's just been taken and put to the outskirts of the town because not only have they given up on trying to help him, but he's given up on himself. And so what you have here is somebody who really has been so tormented and so dealing with his own inward pain that in many ways he's now living on the outskirts of town. And where is he living? Folks, where is he living? He's living in a graveyard. He's living with the dead. In many ways, he's sort of seen as someone who is just completely, and even though he's alive, he's really considered to be what? Dead. I want to emphasize this. This is not simply, and Mark is not dealing here with a behavioral problem at its core. And he's also not dealing with a moral problem. What's interesting here too is this fellow didn't have the ability to choose over good, over evil. He was controlled. And that's not what that word means. He was possessed, in a sense, by evil. And his power. And how it can dehumanize someone. And so Mark wants to paint a picture of this for his original audience and also for us as they hear this story of Jesus. Now, I just want to pause here and go off on a little bit of a tangent. As I was reflecting on this, coming from a Protestant, Presbyterian, Reformed background, we sort of like things decently and in order, don't we? At least I do. And I got to admit that there's a part of me here who, when I sort of take a look at these exorcism stories, I'm a bit of a cessationist, which means this, is that I believe that Jesus did such exorcisms. But in the back of my mind, I'm wondering, do such exorcisms actually exist today? Are they to be encouraged today? Are they prevalent today? Are they needed today? And so when somebody comes and talks to me about the power of evil, or even that in their own life, there's a part of me that I get a little bit nervous about that. Amen? There's a part of me, and I've had that happen to me. Pastor Ian, I think maybe this person that I love and care about, in fact, is dealing with the power of evil in their life. And we need to be careful here. This is where wisdom and discernment comes in. We have the benefit of psychology and of counseling. And I've encouraged people to seek counseling and help when it comes to our spiritual battles. And I stand before you today saying that I have done the same with my own spiritual battles. But again, what I'm trying to suggest to you this morning is that Marcus here is not simply talking about behaviorism or even moralism. Mark is saying that there is a power in the world that can possess, control, and manipulate our humanity that will dehumanize us and that we need to be free from it. Amen? Newsweek, about a year ago, reported that the Roman Catholic Church, in particular, has seen a sharp increase in requests for the rite of exorcism. And that priests who are trained in such things are needed because our culture has been increasingly preoccupied with many things of the demonic and of the occult. People are finding it difficulty to keep the boundaries separate from what is fiction and what is fact. And there are those who are coming to the church, and particularly the Roman Catholic Church, knowing that they actually have this rite of exorcism, asking, I need to break free from this. Father Patrick Collins is a Catholic priest, and in preachingtoday.com, which is produced actually through and in the U.S. and is a really great resource for myself. He's quoted as saying this. He says, "What I'm finding out desperately as a priest is people who in their own minds believe rightly or wrongly that they are afflicted by an evil spirit. And when they turn to the church, ironically, the church doesn't know what to do with them, and we refer them either on to a psychologist or self-help. And they do fall between the cracks and are often not helped." What he is saying there, he is not criticizing a psychologist or going and getting self-help. But what he is saying is that the church has actually lost its understanding of this spiritual war that's going on in people's souls. And we need to come alongside of those who are dealing with this. We need to bring all the resources that we have that are humanly available, and to not forget that there is a God to whom we can come, in whose name we pray, who has come in power and in authority, and will not only help us in our spiritual battles, but we believe has also already defeated Satan and the power of the demonic in the world and in our lives. And that this God will set us free. All of us said these words this morning in the Lord's Prayer, and this is what that means. Deliver us from evil. Either that is fiction for you, or that is fact. Deliver us from evil. Deliver me from evil. I might not be wearing it out on my sleeve like the demoniac, but we have it sometimes. We hide it well, don't we? Deliver us from evil. Interestingly, this demon within the man, he identifies who Jesus is. He doesn't need to guess who Jesus is. Coming from within his soul, there is this voice that speaks and says, Jesus, you are the Son of the Most High God. In other words, as Jesus steps out of the boat, there's a recognition that this Jesus was different than some of the other exorcists and other magicians of that time. And they knew who Jesus was, the Son of the Most High God. And in a sense, there's even a fear as they confront and they know who Jesus is within this man. There's a sense of saying, look, it's not only that the man comes and begs, it's actually the evil spirits that come and say, you know what, we know who you are, and we know that we need to make a quick exit out of here soon. What's interesting is that Jesus doesn't ask this man to repent, because really there is nothing to repent of. This is, remember, it's not a moralism. He doesn't have the ability to choose good over evil. He is possessed. But Jesus asks him this. He says this, "What is your name?" And he replies, "My name is Legion, for we are many." In those days, people would understand that a legion, a Roman legion, was maybe between 5,000 to 6,000 soldiers. That's a lot. What's interesting here is that this man has not only lost his self-identity because he's defining himself in this way by his name, but he's actually lost, and he doesn't even know his own name. He can't speak his own name. As the story goes on, maybe out of the corner of his eyes, Jesus, spots a herd of about 2,000 pigs. In fact, they also spot the pigs that are there, the swine. And what Jesus does is, and it's not really even there's not a dramatic nature to it. It simply says that as the exorcism takes place, the unclean spirits leave the man and they enter into the swine, into the pigs. And as we know, there's maybe a symbolism here, because the swine or the pig was an unclean animal according to Jewish law. And then as the story goes, these 2,000 pigs just sort of herded down, stampeded down the hill, and they all just sort of splashed like so many lemmings into the sea. I sort of chuckle at this point in the story. I'm feeling here for, and just an aside, you really have to feel a little bit for the owner of the pigs, don't you? Right? These 2,000 pigs going down the hill, splashed. Really, literally, there's my whole livelihood being washed up, right? Washed away. But I think what the point is being made here is that which is unclean, that which is evil, has no residency, has no power, has no authority over this man anymore. And they have been defeated, and they have been, yes, put to death. And so, as we even saw last week with the man with leprosy, this yet unnamed man, we don't know his real name. His life is given back to him. Jesus delivers him from evil spirits, from unclean spirits, and brought him a freedom that he could never have gotten or attained on his own. Let me go back to the beginning and just to think about the question, how do we appropriate these miracles, these exorcisms of Jesus in our world today, maybe even in our own lives today? Do we believe that do they believe that they're just relegated to the scriptures, to the gospels, or do they actually have fruition? Can they actually take place in our world today and in people's lives today? Once again, to varying degrees. One last story. As I was doing a little bit of research on this and just trying to get a sense of it even for myself. Back in April of 2018, the BBC did an investigative story and an interview called Satanist Turned Hipster Vicar. And it's about a young man by the name of Benedict Aitken. And he actually tells a little bit of the story of how one day he spotted a satanic Bible at his friend's house. And he says this, I looked at his bookshelf, and I took it from his bookshelf, and I read the whole thing in one go. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Satanic Bible is written by the founder of the Church of Satan, a fellow by the name of Anton LaVey. And it is sold probably over, and it is increasing, 1 million copies since it was first published in the early 70s. Now here's Benedict said, I really connected with it. I read the book and I read it through. And he said, I was unhappy in my relationship with my then girlfriend. I was arguing a lot with my parents. And here's his line. He said, Satanism seemed to acknowledge the pain and the anger that I was feeling. He said, the next day I had a huge, he's English, so this is, excuse me, English euphemism. I had a huge row with my mom. And so I locked myself in my room and started carving a pentagram, the symbol of the Church of Satan, onto my arm. He says this, there was a lot of blood, but it didn't deter me because I wanted to permanently scar my body. The interview with the BBC goes on to say, and Benedict says this, it says this, that Satanism gripped me. It became my life. I drew the pentagram on everything, from my school books to my body, and my friends were just freaked out. They just thought I had gone way, way too far. He said not only that, it wasn't just the visual symbolism, but he said I went from being a caring person to someone who just cared about himself. And I manipulated others for money and for sex. I turned on my family, and I lost my friends. But that is the theology, if you like, behind Satanism. It is all about serving yourself. He even goes this far. He says, one night I dreamed that Satan was at the foot of my bed. I began to have terrible nightmares, and I realized that I was getting quite disturbed. There was a moment when I asked myself, am I really having a conversation with Satan? I felt totally isolated, and I had nobody to turn to except Satan. But then there's good news for him. He said salvation came in an unlikely form. He says, I was invited to a Christian festival for young people. I was actually invited by a vicar's daughter, and the only reason that I went was I thought that she was pretty good looking. But then there was this preacher, and he began to preach as if he was talking about me. He was talking about hitting rock bottom, and I identified because that was me. And then there was a stranger who came up to me and said that he would pray with me. And while he was praying, I felt a sense that I needed to let go, a sense of peace that needed to come into my body. And afterwards, the man said that even though I felt there was no hope in my life, God had a plan for me, and that Satan was a liar. He was speaking the truth. As a Presbyterian, some of these stories are sort of hard for me to sometimes grasp a little bit. Understand that. But this is a journey of someone who's identified in this way. There are more details to the story. How his relationship with his parents was restored after that. How he met and married his current wife. How he made a decision to go back to the school and to become all things a preacher, a pastor, a vicar. But also not in a traditional setting. He decided that his calling was to reach out to street kids and gangs in East London. It began with a house church that began with 5 and now has grown to about 50. This was part of the BBC story around his life. But he ends his story by saying this. He says, when I think back to how scared and lost I was when I was a Satanist, it makes me determined to want to help people in the name of Jesus. I think this is cool. He ends it this way. He says, my name is Benedict. The name Benedict means He says, I was born after a very difficult pregnancy with both my life and my mom's at risk. And he says this, in my darkest moments, I lost my sense of life being a blessing. And now I just want to stay here in East London until God decides it's time for me to move on. My name is what? Benedict. Blessing. Jesus turns to the man and says, what is your name? I think Jesus knew his real name. Perhaps it can be said that just because miracles don't always happen, that doesn't mean that they don't sometimes happen. Amen? Yeah. Jesus Christ asks us, asks me, asks you this morning, what is your name? And perhaps it's not so much that miracles happen, but perhaps it's the fact that we are a miracle in and through who Jesus and what he has done for us. Deliver us from evil, Lord, so that we might be blessed to be a blessing. Benediction. In the name of Christ we pray. Now, let's pray. Our good and gracious God, we thank you for this story for us today. And indeed, it is part of the records that we find in the Gospels. And God, forgive us at times, for we are those who take a look at this and maybe then, but not now, Lord Jesus. God, we ask and pray that you would help us in many ways to see ourselves in this story, that we too indeed are the broken to various degrees. And we need you to come, and your power to come, and evict anything that would be of evil and would dehumanize who we are. We give you thanks that you know each of us by name. Deliver us. Deliver me from evil. In the name of Christ we pray. And all God's people say.